Welcome back to Crunch Labs. I'm Mark Rober, and today we're going to be talking about the 6-shooter rocket launcher, which is an absolute banger. This is one of my favorites. Now, if you just got the box and you haven't opened it yet, let me just show you what it does. So you put this on here. I've already wound it up, and now you got this little bulbous thing right here. Hit your fist down on it like this. You get not one, but 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 rocket launches. And that's just really fun. It's a very clever mechanism. It's kind of like a Wheel of Fortune thing that kind of rotates to each rocket. Now, in just a minute, we're going to talk about all the juicy physics that's going on to make this thing work. But first, I gotta mention, today's kind of a big deal because this is box number 12. That means today, with this gear badge right here, we will complete our diploma and unlock my signature. But I thought it might be kind of fun to take a trip down memory lane. Let's talk about all the cool things you've learned this year by reviewing our diploma here. So for our first box, we had the disc launcher, and this is where we learned all about flywheels because we had that spinning wheel that flung the frisbees out. Then for box 2, that was the coin spinners, and there we learned about the power of ratchets and how you could like ratchet it back and store that up until you hit the trigger, which then flicked the coin and gave you superhuman powers. And then for box 3, we had the tripwire. This is our first prank box. This is speaking to my DNA. And we learned about momentum transfer as those arms would fling around and transfer all the momentum to the balls that went shooting across the room. And then for box 4, this is where we put the A in STEAM, a little art box that made those really cool pictures. And that's where we learned about linkages, how powerful those can be. And then for box 5, this was with that domino catapult, which has been really awesome to see all the examples you guys are putting together with this. But this is where we learned about projectile motion, basically the path that a ball takes when it's flying through the air. And then for box 6, we had the strobe light animator, where you saw Fat Gus running on the Crunch Labs logo when you looked through the hole. And there we were learning all about light refraction. So the light from the LED came up, and then it refracted off the scratchy parts to give that really cool effect. Then for box 7, that was all about mirrors. That was our second prank box where we had the little spider thing that came up with that optical illusion. And then box 8 was all about worm gears specifically and how those can be really useful where you can drive force one way but you can't really back drive it. And there we had our boomerang car that came back and forth. And then box 9 was belts and how useful those can be for engineering. And of course that was with our Duck Carnival game. And that's sort of like an auto target game that maybe you could shoot with your disc shooters or the little party blowers we provided. And box 10 was airball, a really fun one focusing on the Kawanda effect where you got the balls to float and you got that 2-player game where you could knock them out. And of course the Kawanda effect is just a really fun physics principle that's so fascinating to see in practice. And then box 11 was springs. That was our wrist-mounted paper airplane launcher. And that's where we learned that springs are really the workhorses of the mechanical world. If you have a bunch of linkages, springs are really the power that makes them all work well in conjunction with each other. And that, of course, brings us to today, where we're going to be talking about air pressure. And at the end of this lesson, you know what? We're going to put this on here. We're going to unlock my signature. There may be a little confetti that flies around here because this is a moment to celebrate. Now, you might have noticed in this box, you got another diploma. This is for year 2. If you thought year 1 was amazing, year 2 is going to blow your mind because we get to build on all of the principles that we learned the first time around. In fact, I'm gonna just give you a little sneak peek here. So there it is. If you are stoked about year 2, don't worry, you don't have to do anything. Your subscription will automatically roll over. And perhaps more importantly, in year 2, don't forget, your chances of winning the platinum ticket and making a trip out to Crunch Labs are now doubled. So that's just something you want to be keeping an eye out for. All right, so like I said, the engineering principle for today is air pressure, and I wanted to end on this one because I use it in so many of my builds. It's absolutely the #1 way I will take a build and inject energy into the system, and we're gonna talk about specifically what I mean there. All right, so as usual, we're gonna start with our question of the day, which is, why do compressed air cans get so cold? Here we go. Oh, wow, that came with some speed. I almost damaged a really expensive camera. We're good. Everyone good? All right, so let's get right into that. First of all, this is what I mean. Have you ever seen these cans? A lot of times they're used for, like, if you want to dust something off your workbench, like sawdust. These are really great, super useful. As you can see, woo! You get a lot of air coming out of here. Woo! It just comes right out. But as I use this can gets colder and colder. So why does it get so cold? In fact, here's another example. This is a CO2-based fire extinguisher. And when I fire this, oh, you see that? It gets real cold. And then eventually it sublimates when it gets warm. But coming out of here, this is freezing cold. This is freezing cold. Whoops. This got so cold that the moisture in the air kind of formed little icicles right there on the surface. And once I kind of rub them and warm it up with my hands, then they melt and it goes away. So why is this? Why is that happening? Well, that is our question of the day, and it has to do with air pressure. Now let's talk about air pressure. All right, so I've got this little balloon here, right? And I'm gonna blow it up. Now this balloon is like made from latex, right? So it's stretchy. So the breath from my lungs is inside of here, but this latex is like all sucking together to kind of compress that air. It's kind of like the air is real crowded and squeezed in here, right? So there's a higher pressure here from all the latex squeezing in on it, such that when I let this go, you know what's gonna happen. Because the air was so crowded in there that it's like, get us out of here. And as soon as I let that happen, it shoots out, conservation of momentum, air comes this way, balloon goes that way. So here we've got a cross section of a cylinder with a piston, right? And let's say these are air molecules in here. And this is like the comfortable spacing that the air likes to be like, yeah, this feels good. From one air molecule to my neighboring air molecule, this is exactly how we like being spaced out. Now over here, you notice the difference. Now the piston is pushed down. So the same number of air molecules are in here, but what's the difference? Well, they're way more squished. And in this case, the air molecules are like, this is way more squished than I like. I really want to be stretched out. So this is where we say it has a higher air pressure. Basically, it's way too crowded in here. And as a result, it's going to try and push this piston back up to the nominal state. So when we blew up the balloon and we were pinching it off, it was more like this situation. The air in here right now is like, yo, this is pretty crowded. We don't love this. So as soon as I let go of this, what's that air gonna do? It's like, get me out of here. It'll shoot out this way, conservation of momentum, balloon goes the other way. Let's see if physics is true. It is true. Now right here below this is a picture of an air compressor. That's this thing. And what an air compressor does, as you might have guessed from the name, is it compresses air. So this big thing on top is a pump that's gonna suck air in from the outside world and jam it right through here into this tank. Basically, it's gonna take the inside of this tank and just scrunch all those air molecules in that. It's kind of loud. It sounds like this. As you can see here, the pressure in this tank is rising from this dial, so it's squeezing more and more air into the same metallic volume. And that makes the pressure go up. Basically, it's making those air molecules more and more crowded. And they're feeling more and more like they want to get the heck out of there. All right, so now this is pressurized to 100 pounds per square inch. Looks like we are very crowded in this tank all of a sudden. In fact, it's kind of warm to the touch. That's a clue to answering our question of the day, all right? Be thinking about that. Why would this be getting warmer, yet this can would be getting colder? What's the difference there? So if I've got this handle here and I squeeze it, the air comes out. And this makes sense, right? Because it's so compressed in here, it just wants to get out. And as soon as I give it an opportunity, by kind of opening the gate, it shoots straight out. And that's actually what you see here. This is like a little ball valve. So when you turn this, you can imagine all this air is like, get me the heck out. It rushes down the length of this tube. Now what's very clever then is what if I put something like, let's say, a grape in the barrel of this tube? Well, guess what's in the way now? The stinking grape. So as soon as you open this, all this air rushes by. If there happens to be something like a grape in the way, well, that grape is going along for the ride. So that's the principle behind the classic spitball. Not that you should do these, or that I ever did them as a kid when I was your age. But if you put this in your straw, and now when you blow, basically, you're creating air pressure with your mouth. And when you push it forward, oh yeah, what a shot. The higher pressure from your lungs pushing forward just carries that spitball right along for the ride. Same goes for like a blow dart. This is just like a little PVC. I've got a nail here with some like electrical tape to make a little cone. If you do this, you got a cool homemade blow dart. That is all brought to you by the power of air pressure. These little guns they used to sell at like Disneyland, they're called pop guns. What's going on here? Well, the pressure's building up, getting more and more crowded. This is basically the piston, right? And at some point, as I push this piston in, the air pressure's too much, and it pops that cap off, right there. Now you just reloaded. At some point, the pressure's so much, the air just pushes it right off. A Nerf gun is just powered by air pressure. So you cock this back, that stores energy in the spring, and then when you pull the trigger, oh yes, right on frame. A little piston just goes forward, pushes some air, and then all that air gets compressed into this little cavity in here, and that immediately causes this to go flying off the front. Same thing here in this version. Yes, 2 for 2. You cock this back, puts energy in a spring, pull the trigger, then all that air shoots forward and flings the ball out. Another classic from my childhood, the Super Soaker. So in this case, as you pump this, you're forcing more and more air molecules into this chamber up here. And now again, it's getting really crowded up there and the air molecules are like trying to push out. And what that does is it pushes down on the water such that that water is forced out through that inlet and then it goes all the way down and then out the barrel of the squirt gun. But the forcing function for that water that's making it shoot really far is all that crowded air kind of pushing down on top of the water. Super Soaker, by the way, was invented by Lonnie Johnson. He is a former NASA JPLer like myself. He's just cooler and smarter because he came up with the world's greatest water gun. All right, so that's using just stuff we have on the table here, but I figure I would walk the walk and actually step you through a bunch of my videos over the past decade and show that whenever I've needed an energy source, for the most part, I turn to air pressure. All right, for starters, this is pretty old school. This is my Pinewood Derby car, but in the back, you'll see we've got this little CO2 cartridge in here. And of course, in here, we've stuffed a bunch of carbon dioxide. So if you were to puncture this back, well, all that crowded carbon dioxide wants to immediately escape. It shoots out this way, then conservation of momentum. So this is like if you're on an ice skating rink with skates on and you have a big brick. If you throw the cinder block that way, guess what? Intuitively, you guess like you're gonna move back this way. That's conservation of momentum. That's one of Newton's 3 laws. So as all of those molecules of carbon dioxide shoot out that way really quickly, the car goes the other way. And as a result, this thing fires off at 40 miles an hour. You absolutely dominate the Pinewood Derby, and this is what that looks like. Now we've got the snowball machine gun, and this utilizes a gas-powered leaf blower. So when I pull the trigger, it basically spins up the fan, gets air rushing down that tube, and wouldn't you know it, a bunch of snowballs are in the way. So where are they going? Along for the ride, right at my nephew's faces. Now you got the world's largest Nerf gun. This was using compressed air. We actually used a paintball tank. This tank is at 3,000 PSI, and we just let enough air into the second chamber here that's charged to about 80 PSI, and then we pull the trigger. That whole chamber of air has to go somewhere. It goes out the front and pushes the pool noodle toilet plunger dart that's in the way out at about 40 miles an hour. And then because we're using this paintball chamber, we get about 20 shots where we could just recharge that secondary chamber, which means you could just fire off 6 shots like this. Next, we have the world's largest super soaker, and that's just like a scaled up version of the toy. So here in the handle, we have 2 tanks. One is compressed nitrogen, and just like in the toy version, it pushes down kind of on the top of this water and squeezes it all out the front of the gun as that air tries to expand in the chamber that you're kind of putting it into. Now for the liquid sand hot tub, which also led to the terrorization of my nephews, this was powered by some massive nitrogen tanks. I could have used air, but it's actually less expensive and more readily available to get these large nitrogen tanks. We just needed something to get air going underneath the sand, to aerate it, to get that really cool liquefied look like you see here. Then for the world's largest air horn, again, I just needed a lot of compressed air coming down the chamber to vibrate this diaphragm. And just like this tank here, all we had to do was open the valve, so all the air rushed out, and that vibrated the diaphragm, which created that booming horn sound, which we could hear from miles away. What? Next up in my chronology of videos would be the rocket-powered golf club, and you might be like, hold up, Mark, that was rocket-powered, not air-powered. And that's true for the main spinny part. But for the tee, we quickly needed to get up and rotate to the right spot, right? Because it's spinning and you don't want the ball in the path, and then suddenly, as soon as the club goes by, you want that ball to pop up. And that mechanism to pop it up was pneumatic. And that was triggered with a pneumatic solenoid. Pneumatic, by the way, is just a fancy way to say air. So you have like a pneumatic piston like this. This is a piston controlled by air. You also have a hydraulic piston. So on like big excavating equipment and stuff, those pistons on there, there's fluid that goes through there. So those are hydraulic pistons because it's fluid. There's a pneumatic piston because it's air. So these pneumatic solenoids are pretty clever, right? We have all this air in this tank. It's coming right up. It's being stopped here by this little unit. There's sort of a pin blocking the air from coming through this tube and out right here. But that pin is magnetic. And if I give it some current with this battery pack right here, it makes the pin move out of the way, which allows the air to come through this tube, which allows our piston to extend. Now this is spring loaded. So if I cut the power, the pin goes back, cutting off the air, and the spring pulls the piston back into place. So once again, now that you know what's going on, I give it a little current with this battery pack. That sucks the pin out of the way. When I do that, my piston goes up. The crowded air is coming all the way through these tubes, all the way up through these pistons, and it'll just stay up there. You can hardly push it down because all that air is pushing up. It's continuously pushing up on this piston, like this situation, right? I can hardly push against all that air trying to get out. And when I cut the power, the spring returns into place. The first time I used a pneumatic solenoid like this to make something cool happen was on the rocket powered golf club, but the next time I used it was to launch a certain squirrel. The squirrelapult, of course, was our attempt to create a scientific environment to study the manner by which squirrels always seem to land on their feet. So when the squirrel was in the optimal position on the platform was pinned right here, and then we had a pneumatic piston right here. So when we were ready to go, the piston extended, whoosh, and then that pushed the platform up. On the home wrecker, where we had the squirrel that was distracting the squirrels and the platform fell away, that was also a pneumatic piston just in the other direction. Instead of flinging it up, it kind of pulled it back, which meant the platform just dropped totally away really quickly. On World's Largest Elephant Toothpaste 2.0, we used air pressure to pull a quick release that would allow these troughs to tip over, that dumped the catalyst into the hydrogen peroxide, which allowed the reaction to happen. In hindsight, probably should have made that base a little more secure. For Squirrel Maze 2, the squirrel that shot out in the casino, that, as you can imagine at this point, was pneumatic powered with the piston, as was the door that closed for the laser maze. For Elephant Toothpaste 3.0, again, we triggered the troughs with a quick release that was powered by pneumatic, but also potentially more interesting in this case, we had massive air tanks for each of the Devil toothpaste plungers, where as soon as we opened the valve, that pushed these pistons forward and basically immediately shoved all of that catalyst into the hydrogen peroxide for the reaction to like completely mix and immediately happen. In Glitter Bomb 4.0, if you recall, we had the punching bags that shot the lid off, and now you know exactly how we did it. In fact, this was like the exact same style of piston we had in there. We had two of them. You just got to imagine there's the red little 3D printed boxing gloves on top. And in that case, we created our own pressure intake. So instead of something big and red like this, we hogged out some pieces of aluminum. We could jam a bunch of air molecules in there. Of course, when the thief took it, removed the lid, Hall effect sensor sent a signal that the lid was starting to be removed. That pulled a little magnetic pin after we gave it some current like this. Then it punched the lid off, much to the delight of everyone except for the thief. This one perhaps is the most obvious, the world's longest t-shirt cannon. You know, whenever you see people with those t-shirt cannons firing them at like a sporting event, that's just compressed air in that back tank. Again, same concept, air wants to get out, t-shirt's in the way, t-shirt goes flying. That was the same principle here. We just scaled it way up and made it look like a cannon. But essentially there was compressed air in this tank. As soon as we opened the valve, air rushed out and it bombed our t-shirt out of the stinking stadium. In the arcade video, we had the basketball that had these pistons that shot out to grab the rim, and the bottom of the ball articulated, scoring all the points. And then when we were done and mischief was managed, the arms sucked themselves back in when we cut the air pressure and the ball came out and nobody was the wiser. And then finally, right here at Crunch Labs, we got two classic examples. Of course, at this point, you know, the tennis ball cannon, of course, is gonna be air powered. We've got a massive tank outside behind our building that powers those shots so well they can, in fact, go through walls. And the second, and perhaps my favorite example of all these, the fireman's pistons. That works off the principle of air pressure. In this case, you have the cylinder with this piston. As soon as you step off the ledge, the piston starts traveling up, but at the top, there's a small opening, so it kind of creates a traffic jam. All that air is trying to get out, but it kind of gets jammed up here right at the small opening. And just like any good traffic jam you'd find out on the road, that slows things down, allowing you to glide and land on the floor at the perfect speed. So that's a little trip down memory lane, sort of popping up the hood and seeing what's going on inside. And now you can see, like so many of my videos are powered by air. It's the #1 way I inject energy in a system. It's relatively safe, at least compared to explosives. It's really reliable. It's like immediately reusable. It's portable. It scales well. So it's just a really great tool to have in your engineering tool chest. All right, so now let's return to our question of the day. Why do compressed air cans get so cold, right? If I shake this up and shoot it, this is immediately really cold, and yet with this tank, when we're adding air into it, it gets hot. Why would those be the opposite? Well, if we come back here, you know, to compress this air, we're pushing down on that piston. We're adding energy to the system, right? I'm solar powered. I ate a salad for lunch today. I'm converting that energy, and then through my muscles, I'm adding that energy into that piston, into these compressed air molecules. By adding energy, you're making those air molecules get really close and worked up. And just higher energy is synonymous with things getting hotter and being hot. And if that's true, well, the opposite's probably true. If you lower that energy, that would be synonymous of things getting cold. So when you immediately release all of the energy from this can, the energy stored inside goes way down and it gets cold in the opposite way that this gets hot. It's like our sun, where you just have this massive ball of gas, billions of nuclear reactions going off all of the time. That's high energy. That's really hot. Versus like Pluto, which is a dwarf planet. It's really far out there. It's really dark. It's very low energy. And it's cold. So that's kind of what's happening here. When we squish all the air molecules in here, we're raising the energy, it gets warm, versus in the case of this compressed air can, or our fire extinguisher, when we immediately release all that energy and the energy level goes really low versus normal, well, then it gets really cold as a result. And now with that, you have earned your final gear badge. We are going to put it on the diploma. This is a really big deal. 1 year in the making. Congratulations, let's do this together. Gonna line it up and get that final satisfying snap. That was satisfying. And now the only thing left to do is to put the official signature on the diploma. 3, 2, 1. Congratulations! You did it! Year 1 of Crunch Labs in the books. Year 2 coming in hot. All right, well now it's time to put this thing together. You know the drill at this point. This will take me just a few minutes to show you on video. Should take you anywhere from 20 minutes to an hour. You can use the booklet or the video or some combination of both. Let's get started. First, find 1 pair of the wooden legs and 1 red wooden washer piece. Peel and stick the red wooden piece onto the wooden legs. Make sure the hole in the red wooden piece lines up with the hole in the wooden leg piece. Next, grab 1 long white bolt, 1 wing nut, and 1 dark blue side piece. Make sure the etching on the dark blue side piece is facing up. Then use the long white bolt to attach the dark blue piece to the wooden legs. Locate another red wooden washer piece. Peel and stick the red wooden piece to the corresponding etching on the dark blue piece. Next, repeat steps 1 through 3 so that you end up with 2 identical assemblies. Now find the metal ball bearing and the blue plastic bearing housing. Now insert the ball bearing into the bearing housing. Grab the wood frame piece, which has an identical bolt pattern to the bearing housing. Align the holes in the bearing housing with the matching holes in the wood frame. Gather 4 short white bolts and 4 white nuts. Use the nuts and bolts to attach the bearing housing to the wood frame. Now find 1 light blue plastic nozzle and the sheet of yellow sticker foam. Peel and stick 1 of the yellow sticker foam pieces onto the light blue plastic nozzle. Now grab the other wood frame which has the Crunch Labs logo on it. With the Crunch Labs logo facing up, peel and stick the light blue plastic nozzle into the corresponding cutout in the bottom of the wood frame. Next, find the wood frame which has the ball bearing bolted to it. Slide the wood frame with the plastic nozzle down onto the wood frame with the ball bearing. The nozzle should fit into the small circular hole and the bearing housing should fit into the large circular hole. Next, find 1 of the leg assemblies and slide the 4 tabs found on the wood frames into the 4 cutouts in the dark blue wood piece. Next, locate the 4 white O-rings and use the O-rings to secure all 4 tabs into the slots in the dark blue wood. Now grab the second leg assembly and 4 more white O-rings. Repeat steps 10 and 11 by using the O-rings to secure the leg assembly to the remaining 4 tabs on the wood frames. Now gather 6 light blue plastic nozzle pieces and the sheet of yellow sticker foam. Peel and stick 6 yellow foam pieces to 6 plastic nozzle pieces. Now grab the large wooden circle and place it with the etching facing up. Then peel and stick all 6 plastic nozzles into all 6 corresponding cutouts. Now grab the main build along with the small yellow plastic shaft and place the circular end of the small plastic shaft into the exposed ball bearing. Then place the square hole in the large wooden circle over the square end of the small plastic shaft. Find 1 long white bolt, 1 small dark blue wooden washer, and 1 metal eye nut. Slide the dark blue wooden washer onto the long white bolt, then slide the bolt through the yellow plastic shaft. Then from the bottom, screw the metal eye nut onto the exposed threads of the long white bolt. Next, grab 1 rubber band and flip your build onto its side and loop the rubber band through the metal eye nut. Now find the long wooden dowel and slide the wooden dowel through both loops on the rubber band. After the wooden dowel is centered with the rubber band, secure both ends of the dowel into the red wood pieces. You might need to slightly bend the dark blue side pieces to make room for the wooden dowel. Now grab the blue hand pump and slide the pump hose over the tip of the blue plastic nozzle which is poking out of the bottom of your build. Next, find the small red wooden square and the clear plastic tab. Peel the adhesive backing off the red square and slide it into the slot in the clear plastic tab. Make sure the red square ends up centered within the clear plastic tab. Now flip your build back upright and slide the clear plastic tab into the slit in the top. Slide it down until the red wood square sticks to the wood frame. Now it's time to load your rocket launcher. grab one of the foam rockets and slide it down onto one of the blue plastic nozzles. When you get to the bottom, make sure that the 3 red fins on the rocket notch into the 3 cutouts at the bottom of the nozzle. The cutouts prevent each rocket from spinning in place. This is called a rotational constraint. And this is an important detail to make your rotary rocket work, because the fins are how it indexes as it spins around. Now repeat this step for the rest of your foam rockets. There's one last secret before you're ready to take off. Look at the arrows that are etched into the top of your build. Follow that direction by giving the rockets 3 full spins clockwise. And as you wind up the rockets, the rubber band stores energy. When you let go, the rubber band wants to release that energy, but the plastic stopper prevents the rockets from unwinding. And when the rocket hits the stopper, it happens to get perfectly aligned with the pump hose. This is an engineering trick called indexing. All right, place your pump on a sturdy flat surface, then make a fist and pound it down on the bulb pump and let her rip. Okay, so now it's time for the engineering hustle. Now this one is admittedly a little bit less of an engineering hustle. It's just kind of like a cool trick to show your friends or family. You know, a lot of times you're waiting at a restaurant, you know, you've got your water, let's say, and they bring you out a straw. And now when you take the paper off this straw, if you kind of tear both tops off, and then you kind of push the paper down and let it kind of scrunch up like this. So it's like compressed on that end. Then you just slide it off the bottom. And then, again, this is using the principle of air pressure in vacuums. You put your straw in your water, and you just need like a little bit of a drop. And then you could make this really cool paper worm that grows and expands, sort of like this. And you put a little water on it, it grows! It's alive! That's kind of fun, right? Now, of course, when you do this at the restaurant and make a dinner, do not tell your parents Mark Rober taught you this one, okay? This one came from Mr. Beast, okay? Let's just get that clear. All right, well, as usual, good job today. What a banger. Box 12, a year complete. As usual, this is just the beginning. Even though it's box 12, you got to be thinking what you're going to do to take this to the next level. Like, how can you improve on this, right? Maybe instead of this bulbous thing here, you get like a big bag, and maybe you could squeeze even more air to see if you can get the rockets to go farther. Maybe you do some trick shots and you got a bucket or a trash can across the room, see how many in a row you could make. You potentially could put something sticky on the end of this, or like a safe version of darts going into some cardboard. Again, eye goggles, be real safe about that. Maybe you play a favorite game of mine as a kid, which is like Don't Flinch. So you have your sibling across the room and you guys get to take turns. The trick is you can't move your feet, you can't move your body, and you just try to see if the darts hit you or not. And you kind of take turns shooting at each other. Again, just don't forget about proper eye safety and all that stuff. Either way, no matter what you do, I want to see it. Throw it up on socials by working with your parents. Tag us at Crunch Labs. I absolutely love seeing these in the wild. It makes my day every time. All right, so that's it. You've earned your final gear badge. You have unlocked the signature on the diploma. So go put your rocket launcher together, have fun with it, and then I'll see you next time for beginning of year 2, where we really level things up right here at Crunch Labs. And now I gotta clean this mess up. Thanks for watching. That was pretty easy. Oh, one left.